It's showtime. This is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
And this is Father Patrick Briscoe.
Welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation or daily on Patreon. I don't know if they have that option. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to or consume your podcasts. This is a special episode, as everyone knows, because this is a Livesplaining. So welcome to all those who are joining us on the interwebs or through online transmission, as some people say. And Father Patrick, how are you doing this Easter season?
Well, I'm doing pretty well.
Hmm.
Since last we talked, Father Bonaventure, we ended up on the other side of Divine Mercy Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have a special Divine Mercy Sunday grace this year?
I got to. I didn't get to preach Divine Mercy Sunday this year, but I did go over and hear confessions for time over at the JP2 Shrine because there are special graces given for confession and on Divine Mercy Sunday with receiving the Holy Eucharist and all of that at the end of the novena. So I got to do that, and then I got to be in a car for 5 hours driving out to Youngstown, Ohio. So there were graces, there were extreme graces to be had in for Divine Mercy Sunday. So it was good. Yeah, it was a good day.
Nice. I really enjoyed mine. I was out leading a retreat for our Nashville Dominican sisters.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lovely retreat house there in Tennessee called Bethany,
That's right.
right? Named after Bethany, of course, where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus lived together. It was the house where Jesus often frequented, and we're presumed enjoyed rest and respite with his friends. So that's kind of what inspired the name Bethany for their retreat house. So
Yeah.
preached a lovely retreat. I think. I mean, I certainly received a number of compliments from attendees, which meant I got to preach on Divine Mercy Sunday this year,
Oh,
which
that's
I was
great.
very happy about. So yeah, I
Yes,
really enjoyed it.
that's great. It's a nice end of the octave. In a sense, it's the hinge. Easter Sunday is the hinge for Holy Week starts on Palm Sunday and then swings all the way out to Divine Mercy Sunday. And we spend a lot of time excited about the Holy Week, of course. But Divine Mercy Sunday is a nice reminder of the Easter season is this amazing event of the resurrection and all that it means. And then we just carry on for a while. But that is not the particular topic that we are talking about. We always do in Livesplaining. If you're new to the show, which you're probably not, but maybe, we usually talk back and forth about some current event topic or some sort of thing for a little bit before we get to your questions, which you can feel free to post in the comment box. And we'll try to get to those as soon as possible after our banter. And Dominicans, it's always dangerous because we'll just keep talking. But this topic for this one is Supreme Court and Mifepristone or Mifepristone or meta epistemology. I don't know. But there was a Supreme Court ruling recently, and Father Patrick suggested that maybe we could talk about this because for some people, it looks like we're going a backward step after the Dobbs decision. But there might be other thoughts about this. So, Father Patrick, you just want to clear the ground a bit on what happened, and then maybe you'll give some thoughts on it, and then I'll give some thoughts on it. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's first start with what we're talking about. We're not talking about minestrone. We're
No, that's
talking
true.
about mifepristone, which is the abortifacient drug. And so what it does is it blocks a number of hormones, right? Essentially precluding a baby in the womb from receiving nutrients. So it's a kind of starvation effect that is coupled. It's one of two drugs that are prescribed for chemical abortions. So you can see why this is immediately connected, as Father Bonaventure suggested, to the Dobbs decision. And with the rise in chemical abortions after Dobbs, in fact, the rise in chemical abortions after the approval of mifepristone in since 2000, there have been a lot of questions about the drug, about its safety, and about how it's being moderated. So some of those are being just now raised in the courts. And being considered by the courts. So for people just kind of tuning into this conversation, I think that gives a sense of why the issue is so charged, because it's coming on the heels of Dobbs. What it is, it's about one of the drugs that is used to induce a chemical abortion,
Yes.
and gives a suggestion as to what the concern is, right? Because if you have someone taking a chemical abortifacient pill unsupervised, there's a grave risk for patients. So this is part of the medical reasoning, part of the concern. In fact, 62% of Americans doubt the efficacy of the drug. They believe it's unsafe, which is really incredible polling data.
Hmm.
So this is part of why it's in the conversation.
Yes.
Of course, when you Google it, the first thing you see is Planned Parenthood telling you why this drug is perfectly safe and why it should be back on the shelves immediately. But
Yes,
that
and what I think happened is, if I understand the timeline correct, is the Texas lower court filed for this to be banned because of pulled off the market because of FDA regulations. You said testing, all this kind of thing in the early 2000s didn't meet due diligence. That's their claim, at least, and this was batted back through the courts a bit. And the government asked for FDA and the state asked for a stay of the ban. So the question was if there was a ban on it by the Texas lower court appeals, and they went to the high court to ask for a stay to hold the ban, to not uphold it, but to and 7-2 decision from the Supreme Court coming out earlier this last week. Yeah, last week. I think it was the 20th. Yeah, maybe
it was
this
April
week,
21st. It was April
21st.
21st.
Okay.
Yep.
They upheld the stay. So that there's a stay on the ban. So the ban is not going into effect. So you could read that. So Justice Alito and Justice Thomas were dissenting on it, but the other justices, 4 conservatives and three liberals, decided that the Texas ban would not go through for now. It's a stay. So it's not like decided either way. There's still time on it, but you could perceive that as a little bit of stepping back from the kind of excitement that, say, Catholics had over Dobbs and other things.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There. So just to clarify again, because the legal language should be a bit complicated, it means that the drug is on the market while the litigation continues.
Yeah.
And all three Trump appointees came down on the side of the majority in this 7-2 decision. So the only dissents were, as you said, Justices Alito and Thomas. Which is another factor that's kind of interesting, right? Because in the narrative that we've been told, the sort of Handmaid's Tale of how women are being treated and how aggressively the pro-life movement or the anti-abortion movement is accelerating. This doesn't track with that kind of cartoon narrative. This is a different thing that's going on right here in the Supreme Court's decision to freeze the lower court's ruling.
That's right. Yeah. So nothing definitive in some ways. It's just taking time to figure out what to do with this thing. It is an issue because if this drug is pulled, or at least it's one of the drugs that's involved in the morning after pill kind of stuff and abortions, if this is pulled, then it means less access through the mail for abortion drugs. And because different states will be putting, as you know, effects on limiting abortions and such, this was a way around some of that. So I think there's a lot of heat here added to, no doubt, some light perspective wise. But all right, so that's the facts. But what do you make of? You could put your journalism hat on. Father Patrick Briscoe is an editor of OSV, the news wing, you could say. And what do you make of as a Catholic? What are we? Anything to be? Is this just getting excited about something? Are we being riled up into some politics here that we ought not to be getting involved in? Maybe it's just don't jump to conclusions, or do you think? I mean, you already mentioned one kind of takeaway from it, but from a Catholic angle, what does it mean? What should we think of it? What should we do with it? What should we care?
Right. So first, from a Catholic angle, the next day, April 22nd, Bishop Burbidge, who is the bishop of the Bishops' Conference, who's the head of the Pro-Life Activities Committee, Bishop Burbidge said right away that this is a tremendous disappointment. So his words are pretty strong. He says, both in terms of the loss of innocent preborn human life, as well as for women, because we've talked about how objectively this is a dangerous thing. There's all kinds of statistics. I believe, if I'm remembering this one correctly, there's been a 500% increase in emergency room visits of women between I think it's 2002 and 2015 who have used Mifepristone, which I think is a really remarkable statistic. So we see a real danger to women. Again, with unsupervised medicines, there's always risks. And for women, this can include things like ectopic pregnancies. It can include severe internal bleeding. So they're really things that need to be overseen by physicians, by medical authorities here. And so Bishop Burbage is speaking in terms of that risk as well. So that I want to say those two things from the Catholic perspective, right? That we're talking about the objective moral evil, which is the grave loss of a preborn life, and then also the reality that we've got a significant amount of scientific data that has to be reckoned with how these drugs are dangerous and can be dangerous when they're used without proper medical supervision. Okay, so we've got those two realities as Catholics. And then the third thing I want to throw at you, Father Bonaventure, is the political reality. So right now, this is in the court, and we've seen this day. So we're going to see a ton of stories arguing both for keeping Mifepristone in the on the shelves. You know, we're going to see this. We're going to see people defending the drug, people arguing against it, until probably next spring, because it means that this case is going to be argued in the court this fall, in the fall of 23, and then it's unlikely we'll get a decision before the spring of 24, which means that this is going to be asked of every candidate where they fall on this ruling. So it's going to become a litmus test for candidates. So it puts abortion right back into really the top of our political discourse for another election cycle, because the court is going to take, it looks like, up to a year to make a decision on this. So I think that's another reality that we're facing. We're going to talk about this a lot. We've already had some big moments come out this spring, but this conversation is not going to go away, and it's going to directly impact elections coming up in both the fall of 23 and 2024, I would say.
Yeah, and also the dangerous part about this is that this is a matter that probably less Americans are on board with than, say, if you ask Americans, are you in favor of abortion, yes or no, sort of thing, or late-term abortion or something. The higher number, of course, no. But this is, I mean, this drug is used immediately after, so it's a very early term abortion thing. And I think a lot of people are muddled about thinking that, oh, well, that, the time makes a difference. I obviously, you shouldn't have an abortion in the third trimester or the second trimester, but it's not really human that first minute or two. And the Catholic position, of course, is, yes, it is. But this forces that, I think, that precision of thought and the seriousness in a way that we as Catholics in the public square haven't had to argue for in the same way we've had this. It forces the abortion thing all the way back. And that's where it really requires a robust understanding of the person. You don't need to be all metaphysicians to get this, but to know that the Catholic Church teaches that, yes, there is no such thing as a clump of human cells that's living. There's a person, there's a human being, and it could have a good effect of forcing us to precise our arguments and be aware of what we're arguing for, and our language especially. But it also means it's going to be a tougher sell, I think, and there's going to be temptations to kind of fudge a bit on and say, well, we got to compromise, put politics the art of the possible. It's not a big deal, this kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how this shifts the language and the discussion of abortion, because it will force the question of what's really going on here. Because, 12 hours after this is a very young child, but it's still a child, right? Even though it doesn't look anything like a human being, it is a human being. So I'm interested in that aspect, that it forces us to be attentive to what it means to really believe in life from conception and natural death. I also think it brings out the fact that adoption is fantastic, but we still live in a country that just does not take life seriously in this way. And that we're going to have to do a whole lot of work. So we had a moment of celebration, but it's a long slog, and maybe one dam is broken, but there's other ones around there. And our enemies will rejoice over these sort of things. And it's a perennial fight. Sin is always, we know this from our own life though, too. So it's no surprise that societal sin is a perennial temptation, as the way this personal sin is too. So that's what we've got. Anything else on that, Father Patrick, or do you want to jump into questions?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on into our questions. And I think you're right, because for us as Catholics, the biggest point is the metaphysical one, the philosophical one, which you're talking about, which is that every human life from conception to natural death has an innate value that cannot be taken away. And we need to continue to articulate that. Yeah,
never beat that drum. People matter. Okay. Divine persons and human persons. Super important. Here we go. First question. This is from Barry. It says, "Hi, fathers." Hi, Barry. Now, I'm not trying to sound like a snitch. Well, okay, but one of our local priests, often during prayers of the faithful, uses the phrase, quote, "Pray that we take care of Mother Earth," unquote. Something about it doesn't sit right with me. I can just about deal with the cringe factor, as his Father Greg has introduced. But is the phrase Mother Earth also kind of pagan-y? Pagan-y, ooh, I like that. Not a major deal for me. Not ready to start protesting or anything. That's all right. Just interested in your opinion of that sort of phrasing during Mass. Father Patrick, what do you think about, so certainly some cringe here, but what do you make of this? This might be also a broader question of like, how much should we put up with this kind of thing? What's a good way of thinking about, one, the specific issue of this kind of thing, Mother Earth stuff, but two, in general, maybe thinking through what to put up with and what not to put up with, what to suffer, what to do, sort of things.
Right, exactly. So I'll take the first one and you take the
Yep.
second. How about that?
Perfect.
So I'll talk directly about the Mother Earth thing. I feel pretty strongly about that, especially in the context of the Catholic liturgy, because we do have a mother, and it's not the Earth; it's the Virgin Mary, who is given to us by the Lord Jesus Christ as properly our mother. So I think that nature is a poor substitute for the Virgin Mary. In fact, this is one of the reasons why. Uh, Hopkins' famous poem, "The May Magnificat," was originally censored. It wasn't displayed as he had intended it to be displayed,
Oh.
because the Jesuit censors of the poetry contest for which it had been written decided that it conflated too much the natural goodness of the earth with the specific graces of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Hmm.
So if they were sensitive enough, and Hopkins was sensitive enough in his poem to accept that, I think we should be as well.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's a good point, because so this, I'm going to transition this. There are some hills to die on. There's some that are not worth dying. There's always prudence, the art of the possible, and all of this stuff. The political life, and even in this, and not just political life in the sense of Fox News commentary or CNN or this kind of stuff, but the life of the polis, our little communities where we exist together with each other, does require a little bit of give and take, as with all things. But there are things that you just don't want to, hills you want to die on, because they're just so important. And Mother Earth might be one of them, because it brings in so much baggage with it. And the thing is, you might think, well, I can, and maybe this is a good test for it, is if someone's coming into the church, perhaps someone would actually join the church at some point. Like, people might come in and be interested. And they heard X. Do they have the ability to do the necessary interpretive work? You do, because you think, oh, okay, I've got, Mother Earth. Yeah, I mean, we are from the earth, and I know what he's saying, but obviously we don't mean this. But if you just come in there, is that sending the message that actually we don't, as Catholics, we're kind of on the pagan trail, is kind of pagan-y. And in the case of like random things that are esoteric or kind of, jargony, it's not a big deal. But if it's something in the air, I should say, if it's something that's common phrase that's used in another ideological moment or ideological purpose, then we have to be super careful about it. So if someone says like allyship, for instance, that just comes with an interpretation with it that we can't do a whole lot with it. It's too much work to rip out from it the meaning that we don't want to achieve with it. And so Mother Earth stuff does have this kind of pagan interpretation to it that's just there. And now, I guess, dealing with this specifically, so we could say this is a case of this, which it seems like it might be, that it might, how to go about doing that well, and do that. And that's a matter of humility, and emailing after a couple times, and maybe emailing Father, or even talking to him, setting up a meeting, giving him the dignity that he has. He's a priest. We jump to conclusions. Maybe this is something he was taught to do, and he doesn't know any better. And just to raise an issue, not a big deal, but kind of raise that. That's probably the way to go about it. So that's, good principles in here with a concrete example, which doesn't always happen. Hello, fathers. Domenico, great. What does the saying "know thyself" mean? When people use it, they seem to mean something like "know your limits," but the quote comes out of philosophy. Out of philosophy. Ooh, I like that. So that's the Delphic Oracle. That's from. I'll start this one, and that's Delphic Oracle. And so Socrates, of course, has asked this. He's to know himself. This is the kind of wisdom, the perennial wisdom in the early Greeks. and it's something that just passes down, that the knowledge of self is the goal, at least one goal of philosophy. This is with Aristotle too. Of course, you have the sense of knowing yourself, not just in the limits, but in the sense of your capacities, to know who you are and how you fit in with the world. So philosophy is about knowledge of self, you could say, in its first primary meaning, and say theology is about knowledge of God. And of course, knowledge of God leads to knowledge of self, and knowledge of self ought to lead to knowledge of God, these sort of things. So then generally, now people use this in all sorts of different ways, because if it's a famous saying, it's going to be taken up in all sorts of different ways. But in general, it means understanding who you are, not in the personal sense of like know yourself, like my own proclivities, although it can be for that, but in the sense of philosophically, know what I am. I'm a man. I'm a creature. I have a desire for happiness, and I have a longing for God. This kind of thing. So know at the structural level, know who you are and where you fit in with this thing. It's very important philosophically to know who we are, how we fit, and to let that inform our decision making. That's what I'd say. Father Patrick, you got any thoughts on knowing yourself, or
Yeah,
any
Catherine of
details?
Siena takes this up as a beautiful theme, and
She does.
she expresses it as entering into the cell of self knowledge,
Yeah, that's
right?
great. Love it.
And it's about recognizing the kinds of temptations that we're particularly susceptible to, and learning in those moments to surrender ourselves to the Lord. For Catherine, it was all about seeking God, seeking the Father, allowing ourselves to be bathed in the precious blood of Jesus Christ, as she would say.
Yeah.
So for Catherine, the cell of self knowledge is that time where we enter into contemplative prayer, seeking God first, and thereby coming to know who we are. That, as Catherine would say, God is He who is, and we are we who are not.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Catherine Siena, rock out. That self knowledge is great. It's also a Carmelite theme. They have this sort of thing. It's a general mystic theme, but Catherine nails it.
Mm.
All right. What are your views? Oh, this is going to be for you. On using Ascension Press, Augustine Institute, or Catholic Answers materials in adult formation instead of a more free flow Bible study that may be more individual interpretations, well formed or not? How much should formation rely on these more authoritative materials? Well, obviously, anything from OSV under the authorship of Father Patrick Mary's is salubrious and sanctifying. But what do you think about what do you think, Father Patrick, on the broad case here? These other Ascension Press, Augustine Institute, Catholic Answers. What kind of materials for an adult formation group? Let me combine this with the second question in it that you
Yeah,
can answer
nice,
generally.
good.
Hello, Father Blancoventure. That's Alito Venture today.
Alito Venture.
Father Patrick, I am looking to lead an adult formation group of some kind in my parish. Great. What is the right way? Don't forget to ask your parish priest. What is
Mhm.
the right way to view this leadership role when I have heard you say that all preaching is reserved for the ordained? Oh, interesting. You said that. Okay. So, Father Patrick,
Okay, I'll take the
go
first
for it.
part, and then you can take the second. How about that?
Great.
So the first part, using faith formation materials, Mitch, I think it totally depends on the kind of community that you're in, because some guys are going to be very well formed, and they're going to be very confident in expressing sound opinions about the scriptures, for example. So if you're in a small men's group, it might be totally comfortable. If you're in a larger a larger faith sharing group, or a faith sharing group maybe that's intergenerational, sometimes a core text in addition to the scriptures can be really helpful to stimulate discussion, because formation has varied so much across different places and periods in the church in the United States. And so having something to kind of bounce ideas off of, to test and probe and get the conversation going, can be invaluable. So it doesn't mean that any one of those programs, whether by Our Sunday Visitor or any of the houses you mentioned, are the key program. None of them is going to actually fix faith formation in the United States. They can all help, but none of them is the golden solution. But so insofar as they stimulate conversation, great. You might find that you don't need it. And I would say the last factor is whether you yourself, as the leader, are really competent, thoroughly competent, because even the best formed Catholics don't necessarily have degrees in Scripture, for example. So it could be great
Mhm.
to have an authoritative voice at hand, because many questions are going to come up that we ourselves don't always have the answers to. So I would say those three things are important to consider.
Yeah, that's good. And I think it isn't, there is a temptation, I think, with these to go on one of two extremes, either to lead it entirely yourself and then run into the problems that you might imagine, or to just kind of plug in. Now we don't use videotapes anymore, but like there are plenty of good programs out there, of course, like whole series, you could say, Barron's also, and to just kind of let that do the work for you. And a real study formation group, it has to be a human formation group. It has to be
nice.
forming the
Yeah.
person. So it has to be a combination of these things. And I think you want to hold together both the individual aspect that you are saying something, but also that it's not just you saying it. So you're the mouthpiece in a sense for the church because you're handing on something, but it has to be in a personal way. So I think it's good to do both these things. I'll say then on the preaching aspect of it, preaching is well, depends how you, I mean, preaching analogously, we all participate in some fashion, the baptized, in proclaiming the word and telling people the good news, you know. So everyone participates in a sense in the preaching ministry of the church, because even Father Patrick and I, it's not our preaching, it's the preaching of Jesus Christ, who preaches through us. It's almost like a quasi sacramental aspect in this way. And whenever it's just my preaching, it's just me preaching me. Now, I'm going to inflect the preaching in a particular way, given my own, material constitution and spiritual structures. But it's still, I'm receiving the word and handing it on. So your leadership role, as you call it, is still a man of being a conduit through your person of the doctrines and the teachings of the faith, handed down in revelation and tradition. And you have a little bit less, of course, if you're not ordained. You don't have the same care of souls, of course, nor the same training, nor the same mission, but you have the same general pattern here. So I think that's something to be helpful there. Is there anything I missed there, Father Patrick? Does that sound okay?
No, I echo that entirely.
Fantastic. Now check this out. Father John Brown, SJ, thanks so much for the clarity in this. Now check this out. So Father and Hopkins is pretty excellent. This is a Jesuit on. Now I assume he's actually a real Jesuit. That's fantastic. God bless you. I know.
Thank you, Father. Yeah,
it's
that makes me
fantastic.
feel
So
pretty good.
I'm going to do my Jesuit moment thing. So I love Faustina, of course, but I do like Ignatius. This is a little tan. This is a self-directed tan thing I got when I was in when I was in college, and so I always keep it. It's just on my desk, looking at me. So Ignatius is always there. And we could do. We need to do an episode on the Jesuits because they get a bad rap. But I was brought in the church by Jesuits at Oxford, so I love these guys. So more power to you, Father Brown. That's really spectacular. All right, Mike Lynch. Questions. Oh, hey, fathers. Question: which religious order is best for a person considering religious life?
Awesome.
Wow.
Well, Thomas Aquinas has a pretty clear opinion on this, and he would tell you. He would tell you one particular order. Well, at least he writes about the kind of, broadly speaking, the categories of religious life. So in St. Thomas's day, there were two, well, and then three with the introduction of the Dominicans categories of religious life, right? There's orders that are purely contemplative, and think monks and nuns who don't venture into the outside world at all, whose sole duty is to pray. Then you have active religious institutes. Those are institutes that engage the world in a very direct way. So like Christian Brothers are a great example of this. Like their ministry is teaching. Or sisters that run hospitals. Their ministry is serving the people who need the medical care they provide at the hospitals. Well, the third kind of religious community is the kind of community that is the Dominicans, and then a lot of other communities too, which Aquinas calls the mixed life, which is a community that values contemplation as its own end, and then takes the gifts of what has been shared between the religious and God and shares them with the world. So for Aquinas, this is how our basic life works. We sit in rooms and chapels and think about God, and then we tell people the thoughts we've had about God. That's broadly speaking it. So there's a real love, Aquinas says, with that, for that third form. But the direct answer to your question is it's going to depend really on who the person is, because God has designed that person to flourish in a particular context. And it's going to be the case that I'm a very happy Dominican, for example, but I would be a very frustrated monk or a very frustrated Christian brother, because that's not the plan that God had for me when he gave me this vocation. So, of course, one will be very holy wherever one's proper vocation lies. How's that, Father
Yeah,
Bonaventure?
I want to make very clear that we're hitting it off in all sorts of ways here, because your answer is basically what the Father Jesuit, Father John Brown, agrees. But a lot depends on the person. Fantastic, that's exactly right. Because I think I'm a philosopher, so I think in terms of abstract, useless concepts. But form and matter is one of them, and so form and matter come together. I'm doing this motion. The camera's not
Nice.
taking.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Perfect.
Um,
Beautiful.
and
Very
you
good.
know, a form needs to, a form of a material thing has to be fitted to the matter, and the matter is shaped by the form. And so too, I think religious life. We think about if in the context of form and matter, religious life has a form structure to it. As Father Patrick mentioned, there's contemplative, there's active, there's mixed, and there's versions of mixed too. It comes in all sorts of flavors. You get a swirl and all this kind of stuff. Uh, but we are the matter in a way, and some will take better to other things, and it really does matter who you are and how you've been formed and how God's already been working in your life. I also think it's important to remember, and I expect Father Patrick will agree with this, and maybe Father Brown too, that picking a religious order, it's like when you when you think about a wife, you can get into all sorts of trouble when you think, who is the one?
Mm.
Like, who is the one that's going to make me happy? If I miss this one, this 3.54 billion women out there, and one of them is my soulmate. Call it the soulmate theory, right? You might also have like the religious order mate theory, in the sense of like, which one is the one? And it is certainly true that, for instance, as Father Patrick said, it's clear that some things are not for us. I just wouldn't fit in this one, sort of stuff. But it's not at all clear to me. Like, I'm very happy as Dominican. But in a different time, in a different context, in a different place, in a different country, would the Dominican order in El Salvador be the one for me, or would it actually be the Jesuits there? Because it's about you and God, and loving Him, and loving the people through Him, with Him, and in Him, in your community. And a lot of that's also contextual to the place.
Right.
So, end of the time. So I would say what you should be excited about is if you're thinking about religious vocation, you have some basic ideas, brunettes or whatever, but be open to like wherever God might lead you, and be confident that your love of Him and Jesus, particularly in this context, as you'd be entering religious for, can be found in multiple instantiations. There's different options. So the religious order mate theory, I just want to avoid people from. I think keep people from that, because I think it's as crippling as the soulmate theory. It's just, I don't think it's like that. That's my take on it. Okay. Great. So let's see. We missed a comment from Mitch. He says, one, when will you be opening applications for the men's retreat? Talk about formation. In August, Mitch. Mitch, that'll be May 4th. So on May 4th, we're going to open up applications for the men's retreat, which people have gone to before. We had this last year as well. It's in November 3rd through the 5th, I think, this time.
The men's retreat? No, the men's retreat is in August.
That's right. That's in August. That's exactly right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over. So Father Patrick was on the men's retreat last time as well. So even though we haven't opened applications, do you want to give a quick pitch for the men's retreat, Father Patrick?
It was absolutely fantastic.
That's great.
So we did man things at a fabulous Christian summer camp in North Carolina. We had several nice day outings led by expert guides that allowed us to really see some of the beautiful mountain vistas in the area. At one point, we went rock jumping, and at another day, we slid down a waterfall. So it was a pretty amazing outings. Just a great time overall. Plus, you get the benefit of praying with a great fraternity of young Catholic men. So 5 stars, say I.
There you go. So May 4th, and we'll be open applications, and it is August, first week in August. And it's going to be down in North Carolina. So it'll be good weather and all that. All are welcome. All are welcome. All are welcome in this place. I frequently hear the advice that the most important thing in prayer is to show up. Okay, good. I also know St. Thomas said contra, if you can't stay focused anymore in your prayer, then it might be time to stop. Paraphrase. Certainly he didn't speak English. These don't have to be opposed, of course. I say my morning prayer, daily saint, rosary, Divine Mercy Chaplet, be something.
Don't know what that is. Yep.
Halo challenge, daily reading, daily reflection, and Father Mike Schmidt's homily, all through Halo. Halo. Okay, it's a program, right? I can't say I have 100% focus. Who good at that kind of regimen? Through all of these things every day, but I have found fruit in all of them. How do I know if I'm doing too much? The answer is no, I don't know. Father Patrick, maybe this is a good question on. So, what are the dangers in prayer, ritual prayer like this, that it's good for us to think about? And how do we think about attentiveness and the number and the list of prayers? Because I have some experience with this as well before into the order. But maybe so for people who are not in religious life, for instance, how is it best to think about how much to do, what to do, when, this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a cop-out because I entered religious life to have this question answered.
You answered. That's my question, man. You just solved my. I was going to say the same thing. Like that's
like, well,
yeah.
I just do what we said we would do and what the church tells us to do, and I'm confident in that. So that's a little bit glib, but
yeah.
But I would say, Mitch, that generally people are tempted to try and do more, thinking that will increase the quality thereof. But prayer is not quantitative in that way. That just because you do more things doesn't mean that it will be more valued in the sight of God. And that's a very great mystery. So I suspect that, I mean, what you said, if you really do all of those things every day, that seems to me, without knowing the context of your particular life, that seems to me to be a lot. And I think for most lay people, that would be a very difficult sort of regimen to sustain. So my immediate response is to say, well, maybe it would be better actually to supplement with study and spiritual reading rather than pursuing so many different devotions. Just a few thoughts off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I think so. My experience with this as a layperson was, so I would do a prayer list, and I pray for people, and I kept adding to this list until it was a litany of prayer. And I felt like I had to do all these things. I had to pray for all these people. And that's why I thought, this is getting too crazy. I can't do all of it. So then I cut it down into different days. So I split it into different days. And then it kept adding and adding. And I started to realize that I was just adding things. And there was nothing wrong to pray for people. But that I was adding more there to feel like I was doing more. And sometimes doing more is actually doing less if you're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Now, you can be entirely engaged in all these things that you're doing, but it's best, I think this is true for Lenten practices as well and Advent things, it's best to do some things really well as opposed to a bunch of things not well. Now, what does well mean in these situations? Well, it means that you're growing in love and knowledge and love of God and knowledge and love of yourself and your neighbors. So that kind of is a model there, at least a criterion. But if you have to ask the question, am I doing too much? You might be wondering, the answer might already be, yeah, probably. And the cool thing is, and this is neat, in the finite world, when you do something and then you stop doing it, you can always do it again. This is neat. We don't live in a universe, for instance, that has like angel stuff where you make one decision and it's over with. Like you can say, maybe I'm doing too much. I don't know. And you can say, let me experiment to know myself. I will cut off half these things. And then you can see, because it's very unlikely, although not impossible, that Jesus is going to come before you decide whether you're doing too much or too little there. So you can always say, actually, I feel like I could do more. I feel better this way. As long as you're not making all those that list a crutch. That's the thing. For me, it was. And the religious life solves this because now I'm under obedience and whatever they say goes. It's great. Okay, great. All right. Hi, fathers. I'm enjoying a trip with friends to a new city. Oh, great. With some friends. Okay, lots of friends. We noticed a couple of differences at Mass, which bothered us. Ooh, this is like cringe stuff. This is the snitching again. Both of which involve the deacon. Well, there, you got it right there. Oh, you got it right there. I'm assuming that's a permanent deacon. Let's assume that. First, before proclaiming the gospel, we intentionally said, the Lord is with you, instead of the Lord be with you. Yeah. Secondly, during the Eucharistic prayer, the priest gave the deacon the Eucharist to hold in his hand after the Lamb of God. Ooh. Then the deacon consumed the Eucharist. This is like a play-by-play. This is a movie. At the same time as the priest, after, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter my roof. Yeah, this is really thought. I've only seen this before with the concelebrating priest, correct. Is this an allowable regional difference? The answer is no. Is it a regional difference? The answer is yes. Father Patrick, what do you think about?
Yeah.
We're going to
Okay.
restrain
So
ourselves with deacons. We're going to
right.
restrain ourselves in
Yeah.
this. Okay.
So I'm gonna
Make some maybe general
in
comments.
the it's always important when we talk about liturgy and liturgical abuse to make a few distinctions.
Mhm.
Is this the most grave matter? No,
Yeah.
because the most important thing is that the priest says the words of consecration and the Eucharist is validly confected in front of you, right? So those are the key lines that are at the heart of the Eucharistic prayer, and those things a priest cannot change. And if he does change them, then we have like big red sirens and huge danger zone, very bad, not good things happening. The reason it's annoying to you is the reason that it's annoying to me, because obedience to the liturgy demonstrates obedience to the church, demonstrates love for the liturgy and love for the church. And when a priest or any cleric is flippant about those things, it's frustrating. So that I want to start off our answer by saying those two things, by returning to, okay, the church makes a distinction between validly confecting a
Mhm.
sacrament and doing something that is just illicit. So validly confecting a sacrament is saying the words, and this has come up, right, when people change the words at baptism. We saw that, for example. Okay, so that's very bad. Is what happened at this mass that bad? No, it only seems like these are actions that affect laicity, not validity. So are they uh, fudging and violating the rubrics that the church has given us to follow? Yes. Do I like that? No. Um, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I mean, this is the, and what I again a good thing I try to remember when because we go and concelebrate these different situations too, and you don't always have the chance to bring the Dominican Inquisitor hammer on him. Um, is that oftentimes it is not the fault of this man. Like he just was informed correct. He
Yeah.
doesn't. He's
Somebody
not intending to
probably
do
told
this.
him this was okay. Yeah.
We always assume this. Just like, for
Mhm.
instance, it is a cool revelatory moment when you realize that the sister that's not wearing her habit anymore might actually be super conservative, but in her congregation, she was told she couldn't wear it anymore. And she was always told to follow the superior because that's the congregation she entered. So actually, she might have serious misgivings about this, but she's stuck with religious obedience. And it's
That's a
someone
great
someone up
example of
there's
how
going to have
this
to
can
answer
happen
to it.
sometimes.
And
Yeah.
this is not something that I came to initially. I just, because I'm a nasty person, I projected out what I assumed what they must be thinking if I was doing the things they were doing. And it's just a real good life lesson, especially in this kind of thing, especially with the kind of nonsense we had in the 80s and 90s and teaching stuff, is that you just can't project yourself out from today to them. They were formed a different place, especially if we're talking about permanent deacon here. Who knows? Who knows? So it's good to be attentive to note when things are mistaken, especially in laicity. If it's validity, you got to say something about it. If the deacon starts saying the prayers and doing the stuff, no, thank you. But laicity stuff, good for you to know an intentiveness, and also to realize that perhaps guy just doesn't know. He just doesn't know he shouldn't be wearing his stole over top of his, over top of his dalmatic or something. They just don't know. It's amazing. We always talked about the fact that the catechesis didn't go to the laity, but it didn't go anywhere. And so it's just helpful with that. I think that's good. Okay. BIAY. Here it is. Bible in a year with man. Father Mike Smith twice. Yeah,
Oh,
it makes
that
sense. We
makes
usually don't.
perfect sense.
You
Okay.
know,
Yeah. All right.
in prepositions, you don't sometimes you don't include in that sort of thing. That's great. Okay. Michael Lynch said, Father's thinking of being an OP or a Marianist. Well, that's great. They're very different orders. But the thing is, you might love God in either one of them. Don't forget to try out. If you're interested in Dominicans, you might be interested in the Jesuits because Marians are kind of Jesuit formed, sort of thing, if I remember correctly. Okay. Michael Lynch also says, "Is it more legit praying out loud or silently?" The answer is yes. It is more legit to pray out loud or silently. That
It's really great.
depends the context,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's definitely legit to pray out loud if you're saying the creator in the church and you're professing the faith. It's not if you're in an adoration chapel and someone else is trying to worship Jesus. The context matters, that sort of thing. Where the church gives us both mental prayer and vocal prayer. And you could think of also vocal prayer as being like said out loud or said internally too. And the question is, whatever is the situation calls for and whatever your spirit moves you in the context of that situation. So don't just go ahead and yell this sort of things. But both are helpful. So maybe Father Patrick, any thoughts on vocal and silent prayer and the importance of kind of both of them?
Right, exactly. So I will make a case that they're both great. First, with vocal prayer, it could be helpful, for example, for people that are struggling with the rosary. They say, "Oh gosh, my mind waters, and I feel like I'm not
Yeah.
getting anything out of this." Well, form the words with your lips. Actually mutter the
Yeah.
prayers
Yep.
and allow yourself to enter into it that way, as opposed to just interiorizing everything. So I think the vocal prayer helps us combat the Cartesian dualism that is inherent in our society, right? Where we tend to spiritualize everything, but we're bodies too. We have to remember, and so vocal prayer can help bring us back down to earth and
Hmm.
can help
Yeah, that's right.
rectify that split. So that's the pitch for vocal prayer. For contemplative prayer, right? I do just the same thing. Silent prayer, I say, well, we're so distracted and we're always moving about and we don't keep our minds focused. And silent prayer can help us to be able just to unplug and get rid of our devices and close our eyes and think for a few moments about God. And that's something that we all need to do very desperately. So
Yeah. Yeah. If you're
it's sort
not,
of like when you get a question in eighth grade debate and the question could go either way. And the teacher is just looking to see how you defend each position.
yeah,
That's sort of how
both,
I feel about like
both
that.
ways. If you never pray vocally, you're probably not a Christian. If you never pray silently, you're probably not a Christian, right? They're both necessary in different times. There's times for silence and there's times for speaking. We're embodied creatures, as Father Patrick said, and you might find that maybe you emphasize one or the other one, but they're both necessary. This sort of thing. But the the rosary and praying it actually like moving your lips and speaking. That's how I generally do it. I'm going because it is a vocal prayer, sort of thing. So, but not quietly, this sort of stuff. So I think that is helpful. You have a body. Now I'm a Cartesian man myself, but the bodies are still super important. Okay. Ad gloriam rex. How do I know if I'm just remembering past sins that are already forgiven, or if it is something the Holy Spirit is prompting me to confess? This is a great question because um, it's interesting that whoops, knocked over my mic. It might be that this is an exclusive disjunction here, because you can confess again sins that you have been received absolution, not because you're trying to like, oh, I didn't really do it, but because of a deepened contrition. Okay, so it could be actually that you have been forgiven of a past sin, remembering it, but that you're also realizing something new about it, and you want to take that to our Lord, right? As this sort of thing. This is not a. It's not like now becomes a mortal. If it was a mortal sin, you remember it's a mortal sin again. It's still a devotional confession, you could say, or this sort of thing. But it's still a confessable matter. Dominicans think this is very important. You might think that we're not inclined to this, but because Dominican life is about the spiritual life, not just the intellectual life. Dominicans have always emphasized the practice of confession as part of the virtue of penance. That confessing, even devotionally, in a regular pattern, frequently being attentive to sins, not only helps us to know ourselves better, back to the Delphic Oracle, but also like gets us into the groove, into the practice and the habit of saying I'm sorry and being our attentive to this sort of thing. So it might actually not be one or the other, although it can be one or the other sometimes. And I think distinguishing that's a tricky question. Part of it's, I think, in how it feels, in sense of, does it feel like convicting, or does it feel more like a guilty, like, is it the guilt? We know when there's a guilty conscience from ourselves versus something of an outside. But it is tricky. But Father Patrick, what do you think about um, multiple confessions of sin? You could say, what are the pitfalls
Mhm.
there, and maybe then discerning this kind of situation. What do you tell people?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's very helpful, especially when it comes to healing the memory. But part of what's at stake, though, is the will, which is determinative in our sinfulness. So the only risk is, I agree with absolutely everything Father Bonaventure has said. I'm saying some amount of caution because the
Yep.
only risk is to be led entirely by one's emotional state, and that is not a sure guide for
Yeah.
Christian life and conduct. So you have to really be thinking about something and recognizing whether this is a passing feeling and something that's emotional, or whether more is at stake. And it's really prudence, that great mother of all virtues, that helps direct us. in
Yeah,
that.
I think
So
that's no, your distinction between the emotions there was, I think, what I was trying to get at with trying to discern what the feeling is here, and not going on the feeling of just straight emotions, but realizing the difference in that. And that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Okay. Actually, we're gonna close out here pretty soon, so I'm just gonna hit 2 questions quick, and then we'll close it out. But Mike Lynch says, does the order of preachers have lay members or just clergy? We do have lay. So there's third order, which is like the lay order, and then in the first order, that's us and the evil empire. Second order is nuns.
with the habits.
Yep. First order is us, and there are uh, ordained clerical brothers, and then there are lay brothers, which we call cooperative brothers now. And so those are traditional tracks as well. So and they used to have a totally sweet habit with black capucin and all this.
Yeah, they had the very
Black
best.
Scap. It was fantastic. It was really fantastic. I want to take it if they're not going to use it. Okay, so we do have both those things, and finished up with our good beloved Jesuit father here, Father John Brown. Here's our shows like Jesuit sponsor, we could say. OP should do a live stream where we tell Jesuit Dominican jokes. This is funny because people know there are Jesuit and Dominican jokes, and maybe Father Patrick will say something about that. But I don't know if many like Jesuits telling Dominican jokes. I often feel like it's a bit like Purdue versus Notre Dame, the Jesuit Dominican rivalry, in the sense that like Purdue thinks that Notre Dame is its rival and it gets really excited and like beats the drum, literally that big drum and sort of thing. And Notre Dame is kind of like, oh yeah, you guys, I guess we do play you this year. Interesting. And I kind of feel like the Jesuits, the Dominicans were always like making fun of the Jesuits, but I never hear from them because I think they're like, oh wait, are you guys still here? Fascinating.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're still around.
Yeah. That's
no, well said, I would say.
Yeah. That's great. So let's see. A final question before we go. Bonaventure. Ooh, I like that. He's suggesting names. Last fall, I was at JP2 National Shrine for a seminary in Mass, and it was followed by exposition plus sacrament. Nuns had these cool bells. I saw you afterwards. Do you know what that was about? No, I have no idea what nuns are doing with cool bells, but I encourage them to have sweet bells. So, all right. Yeah. Well, that was a delightful conversation with those of you here. Especially always happy to have Jesuits with us. Always are. Thanks again to all our supporters. If you'd like to tithe or give any money to our work, check us out at patreon.com/Godsplaining. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Do we really do that?
I know we do for now.
Incredible. Leave a 5-star review or whatever star. Visit godsplaining.org to shop our merchandise and get dates and information for upcoming Godsplaining events, which now I will pitch. We have an all-comers retreat coming up. You still sign-ups for that. Please do. It'll be a wonderful time. We're going to be studying the 4 cardinal virtues under Joseph Pieper, a great German Dominican. Nope. Dominican Thomist. Not the same thing, although you could imagine it could be confused. Some have. It's a great book. It'll be a delightful time to have you out there in Malvern in Pennsylvania. And then on May 4th, the men's retreat, which Father Patrick will be leading. That'll be a sign up for that. So do sign up for that as well, and check out the godsplaining.org for any of the kind of stuff that's going on there. We still don't have the Hold My Kappa merchandise, little stickers and stuff yet, but I'm waiting for it. So many thanks to all you. God bless you this Easter season as it continues towards Ascension, Pentecost. Know of our prayers for you, and please pray for us. We'll catch you next time on Godsplaining.